Lauren Rosenberg was balancing a tray of linguine when she heard it, a child's desperate cry cutting through the jazz and dinner conversations at Ristorante Bella Notte. She set down her tray and hurried toward table 14, where the restaurant's most feared patron sat in his tailored black suit. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, sat rigid in a red dress, hands clamped over her ears, tears streaming down her flushed cheeks as she rocked violently. She clutched a teddy bear, hyperventilating. Around her, Chicago's elite continued dining. Waiters pretended not to notice. Diners whispered behind napkins. One woman muttered, "Can't he control his child?" Lauren recognized the signs immediately. Her cousin Marcus had autism. She'd seen sensory meltdowns like this dozens of times. She knelt a few feet from the booth, careful not to invade space. Scott Walker's cold blue eyes that made criminals confess, locked onto her. But they weren't cold now. They were panicked. This man who controlled half the city's underground looked utterly helpless as his daughter unraveled. "Hi, sweetheart," Lauren said softly. "My name is Lauren. I think the lights and sounds are too much right now, aren't they?" The child's rocking slowed fractionally. "I'm going to help make it quieter. I'm not going to touch you. I'm just going to make the space safer." Lauren stood and dimmed the massive crystal chandelier. Then she signaled the jazz quartet to stop. She positioned herself between the girl and gawking diners. "Is this better?" The child's hands slowly lowered. "Sandy," she whispered. "That's a beautiful name. I love your red dress. It's my safe color." "That makes perfect sense. Sandy, can you squeeze your teddy bear really tight?" Sandy clutched the bear to her chest, the deep pressure calming her. "Now, can you tell me 3 things you can see?" "My bear. Daddy's watch. Your name tag. Perfect. 2 things you can hear. Your voice. The kitchen refrigerator. 1 thing you can touch. Bear's soft fur." "You did so well, Sandy." The crisis was de-escalating when Lauren heard sharp footsteps behind her. "Miss Rosenberg. My office. Now." The manager's voice was ice. "You embarrassed our clientele, violated protocol, stopped entertainment, and created a spectacle," Manager Sterling hissed. "You're fired." "That child has autism. She needed help, not an audience. This is a 5-star establishment, not a daycare. You're done." A knock interrupted them. Scott Walker entered without permission, his presence suffocating the small office. "That woman just helped my daughter when no one else would. Reconsider this." Sterling straightened with foolish pride. "With all respect, Mr. Walker, I run this restaurant. I maintain standards regardless of who the patrons are." Scott's jaw tightened. He looked at Lauren with those unsettling blue eyes, now somehow warm, and gave the slightest nod before leaving. Lauren was escorted out through the service entrance, her paycheck withheld. As she stepped into Chicago's cold night, jobless and heartbroken, she had no idea the dangerous man in the black suit was following her to the parking lot, or that he was about to make her an offer that would change everything. If you're ready to enjoy this story, hit that subscribe button, like this video, and drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. Your support helps us in creating more amazing stories, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's jump right into the story. Lauren moved toward table 14 with a kind of calm purpose that came from experience, not confidence. Her cousin Marcus had taught her that panic was contagious, especially to someone already drowning in sensory overload. She approached slowly, making herself visible in the child's peripheral vision before kneeling a careful 3 feet away, close enough to help, far enough not to invade. "Hi, Sandy," she said softly, her voice steady and low. "My name is Lauren. I'm going to help make things quieter, okay? I won't touch you unless you want me to." Sandy's rocking didn't stop, but her shoulders dropped fractionally. Permission. Acknowledgement. These things mattered. Lauren stood and caught the eye of the jazz quartet's pianist. She made a slicing gesture across her throat. The music died mid-chord, leaving only the ambient sounds of silverware on china and hushed conversations. Then she walked to the wall panel beside the kitchen entrance, the one only staff knew about, and dimmed the massive crystal chandelier that had been casting harsh geometric shadows across every surface. The dining room's atmosphere shifted instantly. The light became warm instead of clinical, golden instead of white. "Is this better?" Lauren asked, returning to her position near Sandy. Across the restaurant, manager Robert Sterling's had snapped up from the reservation's podium. His expression cycled through confusion, realization, and then fury in the span of 2 seconds. He began weaving through tables toward them, his jaw set like granite. Lauren had maybe 60 seconds before she lost her job. She intended to use them. "Sandy, sweetheart, can you do something for me?" She kept her voice gentle, unhurried. "Can you tell me 3 things you can see right now?" Sandy's hands were still pressed over her ears, but her violent rocking had slowed to a subtle sway. Her eyes, red-rimmed and wet, darted around the space. My bear," Sandy whispered. It fell. Lauren spotted the teddy bear on the floor beneath the table, tan and worn, clearly beloved. She retrieved it carefully and set it within Sandy's reach, without forcing it into her hands. "Here's your bear. He's safe. What else can you see?" "Daddy's watch. Your name tag. Perfect. 2 things you can hear." Sandy's hands lowered slightly from her ears. "Your voice. The kitchen sounds. Excellent. 1 thing you can touch." Sandy reached for the teddy bear, clutching it to her chest. "Bear's soft fur. You're doing so well." Lauren noticed Sandy shivering. The red dress was beautiful but thin, and the child's nervous system was still recovering. Without overthinking it, Lauren shrugged out of her black cardigan sweater and held it out. "This is softer than your dress. Would you like to try it? No scratchy tags." Sandy looked at the sweater, then at Lauren, then slowly took it. She pressed the fabric against her cheek first, testing it, before draping it over her shoulders like a cape. The weight and warmth seemed to ground her further. Her breathing had evened out. The tears had stopped. The rigid, panicked tension in her small body had melted into exhaustion. Lauren glanced up at Scott Walker for the first time since she'd begun. The notorious Mafia boss sat frozen in his chair, his dangerous hands clenched on the table's edge, his infamous cold blue eyes fixed on her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Shock, maybe. Or something more complicated. He'd been sitting inches from his daughter while she suffered, and he hadn't known what to do. But a stranger, a waitress with a black apron and calloused hands, had known exactly what to do. "Miss Rosenberg." Sterling's voice cracked like a whip beside her. "We need to speak. Now." Sterling's grip on Lauren's elbow was just shy of painful as he steered her away from table 14. She glanced back once and saw Sandy wrapped in her cardigan, calmer now, watching her leave with confused eyes. Scott Walker's gaze followed her too, sharp and calculating. The manager's office smelled like expensive cologne and leather, all pretense and polish. Sterling closed the door with controlled force and turned on her, his face red beneath his perfectly styled silver hair. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" His voice was low and venomous. "You embarrassed our most distinguished clientele. You violated lighting protocol. That chandelier is an antique centerpiece, not a dimmer switch for your convenience. You stopped our entertainment mid-set. You created a spectacle in the middle of evening service." Lauren's hands were shaking, but she kept her voice steady. "Mr. Sterling, that child was having a sensory meltdown. She has autism. The lights and sounds were overwhelming her nervous system. She needed immediate help, not. I don't care what she needed." Sterling cut her off with a slashing hand gesture. "This is Ristorante Bellinotte. We serve Chicago's elite. We maintain a standard of excellence that doesn't include waitresses playing amateur therapist and disrupting a 5-star establishment." She's 6 years old, and she was in distress. She was a disruption. And so are you. Sterling moved behind his desk, already pulling forms from a drawer. "You're terminated, effective immediately. Clear out your locker and—" The door opened without a knock. Scott Walker filled the doorway, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. That woman just helped my daughter when no one else would, Scott said, his words measured and deliberate. I'd like you to reconsider this decision. For a moment, Sterling's face went pale. Lauren saw the fear flicker across his features, the instinctive recognition of danger that every person in Chicago felt around Scott Walker. But then something else hardened in the manager's expression.
Pride.
Territorial authority. With all due respect, Mr. Walker, Sterling said, straightening his spine, I run this restaurant. The Bianchi family may own the building, but I maintain the standards that keep Ristorante Bellinotte at 5 stars. And those standards apply to everyone, regardless of who the patrons are. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Even you don't control everything here. Scott's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath his beard. His blue eyes went flat and cold, the look that made men disappear.
But he didn't argue.
He simply held Sterling's gaze for 3 long seconds, then looked at Lauren. Something passed between them, an acknowledgement she didn't quite understand. He gave her the smallest nod and walked out. Sterling's confidence returned the moment Scott left. Antonio will escort you to your locker. You have 5 minutes to collect your belongings and exit through the service entrance. Your final paycheck will be adjusted for damages and disruption caused tonight. You can't withhold my paycheck. That's illegal. Take it up with the labor board. Sterling's smile was thin and cruel. Of course, you'll need to explain why you were fired for insubordination and violating establishment policy. Good luck finding another position in this city's restaurant industry after that. The words hit like a physical blow. Lauren's rent was due in 6 days. Her sister Emma's tuition payment was due in 2 weeks. She'd been counting on this paycheck, on the tips from tonight's service, on the stability of this job she'd worked so hard to keep. Antonio, the head of security, appeared at the door. He at least had the decency to look apologetic as he gestured for her to follow. Lauren walked through the kitchen in her stained blouse and apron, past coworkers who wouldn't meet her eyes. She cleaned out her locker, an extra pair of non-slip shoes, her phone charger, a photo of Emma. Everything she'd built here fit in her purse. The service entrance opened to a cold Chicago alley that smelled like garbage and rain. The door locked behind her with a metallic click that sounded like finality. Lauren stood there in the November wind, jobless and heartbroken, and allowed herself exactly 30 seconds to feel the panic rising in her chest before she forced herself to breathe. Lauren's Honda was parked in the employee section of the lot, wedged between a dumpster and a chain-link fence. She sat in the driver's seat with the engine off, staring at the cracked dashboard, and allowed herself exactly 2 minutes to cry. Not the pretty kind of crying, the ugly, gasping kind that came from fear and exhaustion and the crushing weight of knowing she'd just sacrificed everything for a stranger's child. 30 seconds in, she saw her rent notice in her mind. 1 minute in, she saw Emma's face when Lauren would have to tell her the tuition payment wasn't coming. At 2 minutes, she wiped her eyes with her palms and reached for her keys. A knock on the window made her jump hard enough to hit her elbow on the door. Scott Walker stood outside her car in the dimly lit parking lot, his black suit making him nearly invisible except for his face caught in the orange glow of the security light. Lauren's heart hammered as she rolled down the window manually. The automatic function had died 3 years ago. I'm sorry you got fired, Scott said without preamble. His voice was different than it had been in the restaurant. Quieter, almost gentle. I tried to stop it. I know. Lauren's voice came out rough from crying. Thank you for trying. How did you know what to do with Sandy? There was something raw in the question, something vulnerable beneath the dangerous exterior. 7 nannies. Therapists.
Specialists.
None of them could calm her down like that. Lauren swallowed against the tightness in her throat. My cousin Marcus. He was diagnosed with autism when he was 4. I grew up watching my aunt learn about sensory processing, about meltdowns versus tantrums, about grounding techniques and safe spaces. I spent summers helping with his therapy routines. You learn to recognize the signs. Scott's jaw worked like he was chewing on words he didn't know how to say. Finally, Sandy's mother died 2 years ago. Car accident. Anna understood her. Knew how to help her.
I've been
I've been failing her ever since. The grief in his voice was so stark it hurt to hear. I've hired 7 nannies in 2 years, he continued. None of them lasted more than 3 months. They try to fix her, train her, change her, make her fit into their idea of what a child should be. He looked at Lauren with those piercing blue eyes. You just helped her. You saw what she needed and you gave it to her. Lauren didn't know what to say to that. I want to hire you, Scott said. Live-in caregiver. Autism specialist. Whatever title you want. You'd have your own suite in my home.
Full access to Sandy.
Salary triple what you were making at the restaurant. The number that came out of his mouth made Lauren's breath catch. Triple. That was Emma's tuition for the year. That was rent and groceries, and maybe even savings. My world is complicated, Scott continued, his voice dropping lower. Dangerous, sometimes.
I won't lie about that.
But Sandy would be safe. You'd be safe. I protect what's mine. Lauren's hands tightened on the steering wheel.
She should say no.
She should run from whatever darkness lived in this man's world. She should find another waitressing job and scrape by the way she always had. But she kept seeing Sandy's face. The terror in those bright eyes as the world overwhelmed her. The way she'd relaxed when someone finally understood. And she kept seeing Scott's expression as he watched his daughter suffer and didn't know how to help. Why me? Lauren asked. You could hire actual specialists. People with degrees and credentials. Because Sandy responded to you in 5 minutes when she wouldn't respond to them in 5 months. Scott's voice was absolute. Because you broke protocol and risked your job for a stranger's child. Because I watched you, and I trust you. Lauren thought about Emma's tuition, about rent, about purpose, about the little girl in the red dress who needed someone who understood. When do I start? Lauren's single suitcase sat on the passenger seat of her Honda as she pulled up to the address Scott had given her. The doubt that had been whispering since last night became a roar. 12-foot stone walls surrounded the property. Security cameras tracked her approach from multiple angles. When she stopped at the gate, 2 men in dark suits and earpieces appeared, their eyes assessing her with professional thoroughness before one spoke into his wrist and the iron gates swung open. She was entering a fortress, and she had no idea if she'd be able to leave. The driveway curved through manicured grounds to a sprawling estate that looked like old money and new security systems had merged. Lauren's hands were slick on the steering wheel as she parked. Another man in a suit opened her car door before she could reach for the handle. Miss Rosenberg, Mr. Walker is expecting you. The front door opened before she reached it. Scott stood in the entrance, looking less intimidating in dark jeans and a black Henley, though his presence still commanded the space. But it was what Lauren saw beyond him that made her breath catch, not the marble floors or the crystal chandelier or the expensive art on the walls. It was Sandy's crayon drawings covering the stainless steel refrigerator in the open kitchen. Colorful handprints on construction paper. A child's painting of a red flower with "For Daddy" scrawled in uneven letters. This wasn't just a fortress. Someone lived here. Your suite is upstairs, Scott said, gesturing for her to follow. 2nd floor, east wing. You'll have complete privacy. The suite was larger than Lauren's entire previous apartment. Bedroom, sitting room, private bathroom with a soaking tub, and windows that overlooked the gardens. Lauren set her suitcase down, suddenly aware of how little she owned, how out of place she was. Sandy's room is down the hall, Scott continued, his voice careful. I'd like to show you what we've set up. Sandy's bedroom was a study in contradiction. Expensive furniture softened with sensory-friendly modifications. Dimmer switches on every light source. A closet filled with soft, tagless clothing in muted colors. A weighted blanket folded at the foot of her bed next to a collection of stuffed animals. Noise-canceling headphones hung on a hook within easy reach. And on the wall, a blank visual schedule board with Velcro picture cards stacked beside it. Scott stood in the doorway, his powerful frame somehow diminished by uncertainty. Her mother started this, he said quietly. Anna researched everything: sensory integration, communication strategies, environmental modifications. I've tried to continue it after she. He stopped, swallowed. But I don't know what I'm doing. I buy the weighted blankets and the special clothing, but I don't know when Sandy needs them or how to help her use them. I know she needs routines, but I don't know how to build them. I'm just guessing. It was the most vulnerable thing Lauren had ever heard from a man whose reputation was built on ruthless certainty. She was seeing past the Mafia boss for the first time, past the danger and the power to the grieving widower beneath, the overwhelmed father who loved his daughter desperately and had no idea how to reach her. Daddy. They both turned. Sandy stood in the hallway clutching her teddy bear, still wearing her red dress from last night. Her eyes found Lauren and widened with recognition. Are you staying? Sandy asked, her voice small and hopeful. Lauren crossed the room and knelt to Sandy's eye level, the way she had in the restaurant. The way that said, I see you, I respect you, I'm here. I'm staying, Lauren said gently. And we're going to figure things out together. You, me, and your dad. How does that sound? Sandy took a tentative step forward. Then another. Then she wrapped her small arms around Lauren's neck, the teddy bear squished between them, and whispered, Okay. Over Sandy's shoulder, Lauren caught Scott's expression. The dangerous man, who controlled half of Chicago, looked like he might break. The first 2 weeks at the estate fell into a rhythm Lauren built deliberately, one small routine at a time. Wake up. Breakfast at 8. Visual schedule velcroed to the board, pictures showing what would happen next. Morning activities. Lunch. Quiet time. Afternoon activities. Dinner. Bedtime routine. Predictability became Sandy's anchor. Scott watched from the periphery at first, this dangerous man trying to understand his own daughter through a stranger's eyes. Lauren taught him in stolen moments between Sandy's activities, conversations that felt like defusing bombs. Why does she do that with her hands? Scott asked one morning, watching Sandy flap her hands excitedly while looking at her favorite book. It's called stimming. Self-regulation. It helps her process the happy feelings. Lauren kept her voice even educational. It's not something to stop. It's healthy. Scott frowned, processing. The second nanny tried to train it out of her. Made her sit on her hands. That would be like asking you to hold your breath while running, Lauren said quietly. Sandy needs it. At dinner, Scott noticed Sandy eating only 3 items on her plate. She barely eats anything. It's not pickiness, it's texture sensitivity. Certain foods feel wrong in her mouth. We accommodate it, we don't fight it. She eats enough. She's healthy. Another day, she told my associate his cologne smelled bad. Right to his face. That's honest communication, not rudeness. Sandy doesn't have the filters neurotypical people develop. She says what she experiences. Lauren smiled. It's actually refreshing once you adjust. Scott absorbed every lesson like his daughter's life depended on it. Which, in a way, it did. The breakthrough came on a Saturday. Scott appeared in the doorway while Lauren was working on letter recognition with Sandy, his eyes bright with excitement. Get your coat, Sandy. We're going to the amusement park. Sandy's face crumpled instantly. The book fell from her hands. Within seconds, she was rocking, hyperventilating, hands over her ears. In the car, because Scott had already loaded them both in despite Lauren's attempts to intervene, Sandy's meltdown escalated to full crisis. She screamed, thrashed against her seatbelt, kicked the back of Scott's seat with desperate force. Sandy, stop. Scott's hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel. He pulled over, his frustration bleeding into his voice. I'm trying to do something nice. I'm trying to make you happy. Lauren turned in her seat, keeping her voice calm despite the chaos. Scott. To you, surprises are exciting. To Sandy, they're terrifying. She doesn't know what an amusement park looks like, sounds like, feels like. She doesn't know how long we'll be there, or what will happen. It's overwhelming before we even arrive. Scott stared at his daughter in the rearview mirror, something breaking in his expression. Then how do we? We prepare her. Pictures, choice, predictability. Lauren pulled out her phone.
We show her photos of the park.
We let her choose 2 rides she wants to try. We tell her exactly how long we'll stay. We give her control. They went home. That evening, Lauren and Scott sat with Sandy at the kitchen table with printed pictures of the carousel, the Ferris wheel, the gentle kiddie coaster. Sandy studied each one, touched them, asked questions. She chose the carousel and the train ride. They marked on the clock, 2 hours. The next Saturday, they tried again. Sandy rode the carousel gripping the painted horse's pole. Her face split into a smile, so wide it looked like joy incarnate. Scott stood at the barrier watching his daughter laugh, really laugh, the kind that came from pure happiness, and something cracked open in his expression. Grief and hope and love all tangled together. That night, after Sandy was asleep, Scott found Lauren in the kitchen making tea. He stood in the doorway for a long moment before speaking. Anna understood her. From the beginning. His voice was rough. She'd know what Sandy needed before Sandy did. After the accident, I was so scared I'd fail our daughter. That I'd lose her too, just in a different way. He met Lauren's eyes. You're teaching me how to be the father she deserves. I don't know how to thank you for that. You don't need to thank me, Lauren said softly. Just keep learning.
Keep trying.
That's what she needs. Lauren's role expanded naturally in the 3rd week. She accompanied Sandy to therapy appointments, occupational therapy sessions, speech evaluations. Scott insisted on coming too, which meant his security detail followed, which meant the specialized therapy center staff whispered in corners and avoided eye contact. At Sandy's first speech therapy session, the therapist suggested using a reward system for verbal requests. We can use candy or small toys to incentivize. You're not bribing my daughter to communicate, Scott said, his voice dropping to that dangerous quiet that made people step back. The therapist paled. Mr. Walker, I only meant... Scott. Lauren touched his arm lightly, a gesture that surprised them both. Can I talk to you outside for a moment? In the hallway, she kept her voice gentle. I know you want to protect her, but intimidating her therapist doesn't help Sandy. The reward system can work if we do it right. We just need to make sure it's motivating for her, not coercive. Scott's jaw worked. I don't want anyone treating her like a trained animal. Neither do I. So we guide them. We advocate. But we do it as a team, not as a threat. She met his fierce blue eyes. Okay. Something in his expression softened. Okay. The danger didn't announce itself with drama. Lauren noticed it in small details, a silver sedan parked across from the therapy center 2 sessions in a row. The same man with a camera near the park where they took Sandy for sensory walks. A black SUV following them at a distance. Scott's security team tripled overnight. Men in suits appeared at the estate's perimeter. Cameras multiplied. The fortress tightened around them. Lauren found Scott in his office past midnight, surrounded by ledgers and multiple phones, his face illuminated by laptop screens showing security feeds.
He looked exhausted.
Dangerous.
Both.
You should be sleeping, he said without looking up. So should you. Lauren stepped inside, closing the door behind her. Scott, what's happening? Why are we being watched? His hands stilled on the keyboard. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then, there are people who'd hurt Sandy to hurt me. Rivals who'd use her as leverage to take what I've built. That's why I built this fortress. That's why I need the walls and the cameras and the men with guns. He finally looked at her, and the rawness in his expression stole her breath. That's why I was terrified to hire you. Because caring about someone makes them a target in my world. Lauren moved closer, her heart pounding. You're trying to be everything. Father, protector, provider, in 2 completely different worlds. The legitimate and the criminal. The gentle and the violent. You're splitting yourself in half trying to keep her safe from both the world outside and the world you've created. I don't know how to do it differently. His voice cracked slightly. This life, it's all I know. It's how I provide for her. How I keep her safe. You're doing better than you think, Lauren said softly. You're learning. You're trying. You're here. Scott stood, closing the distance between them until she could feel the heat radiating from him. You make it feel possible. Like I can be both. Like I don't have to choose. The air between them shifted, charged with something Lauren hadn't let herself acknowledge. She could see it in his eyes. Gratitude transforming into something deeper, more complicated. Part of her wanted to step closer. The other part knew exactly why she couldn't. Sandy comes first, Lauren said, her voice steadier than she felt. Always. Whatever this is between us, whatever it might become, she has to come first. Always, Scott agreed, but his eyes didn't leave hers. I wouldn't have it any other way. The tension didn't break. It simply settled between them, acknowledged and unresolved, a promise and a warning both. The envelope appeared on Lauren's car windshield while she was inside the estate helping Sandy with her afternoon routine. No postage. No return address. Just her name written in block letters across the front. Inside was a photograph of Emma leaving her campus library, backpack slung over one shoulder, completely unaware of the camera capturing her. Beneath it, a note in the same block letters. Nice family. Would be a shame if something happened. Lauren's hands shook so hard the photo blurred. Her sister. Her baby sister who knew nothing about Scott's world, about the danger Lauren had walked into. Emma, who was supposed to be safe at college, living the life Lauren had sacrificed everything to give her. She found Scott in his office. He looked up from his laptop, saw her face, and was on his feet instantly. What happened? Lauren couldn't speak. She just handed him the envelope. Scott's expression went through a transformation that chilled her blood. The warmth, the vulnerability, the man who'd been learning to be a father. All of it disappeared behind a mask of cold calculation. His eyes became flat and merciless. This was the man whose name people whispered with terror. Moretti, he said quietly, studying the photo.
They found out about you.
About Emma. I should leave. Lauren's voice came out strangled. I should leave and take Emma far away before.
No.
The single word carried absolute authority. Scott pulled out his phone, his movements precise and controlled. No one threatens my family. The word hit Lauren like a physical thing. Family. He'd included her in that definition. Within 10 minutes, the estate erupted into controlled chaos. Scott made calls in rapid succession, his voice never rising but carrying lethal certainty. Men in suits arrived. Plans were made in language Lauren only half understood. But she understood the core message. Emma would be protected. Sandy would be protected. Lauren would be protected. Bring her here, Scott ordered.
Now.
Full security detail. Emma arrived 2 hours later, escorted by 3 of Scott's men, her face pale with fear and confusion. Lauren met her at the door, pulling her into a fierce embrace. What's happening? They wouldn't tell me anything. They just said you needed me safe, and Emma's words tumbled out frantically. I'll explain everything. I promise. But right now you're safe. That's what matters. Over the next 6 hours, Lauren watched Scott operate in his other world. He made people disappear, not killed, she hoped, but removed from the board. He spoke in coded language about territory and leverage. He was ruthless, efficient, terrifying. But she also saw him check on Sandy 3 times during the crisis. Saw him kneel beside his daughter's bed while she slept, his dangerous hands gentle as he brushed hair from her forehead. Heard him gentle his voice when Sandy woke confused and asked, Daddy, why are there more people outside? Just keeping everyone extra safe, sweetheart. Go back to sleep. She watched him prioritize their safety over business when one of his associates suggested using the Moretti threat as an opportunity to expand territory. No, Scott said flatly. We protect first. Everything else waits. The duality was jarring. He was a man who made criminals disappear with a phone call, yet he tucked his daughter in with infinite tenderness. He was violence and gentleness existing in the same body, and somehow, impossibly, Lauren was falling for both versions of him. Late that night, Emma finally asleep in a guest room, Scott found Lauren in the kitchen. Neither spoke. He just pulled her into his arms, and she let herself be held by hands that had ordered terrible things that day, but only ever touched her with care. I won't let anything happen to you, he said against her hair. Or Emma. Or Sandy. I swear it. Lauren believed him. That was the most terrifying part. The Moretti family's ultimatum arrived by courier, surrender 3 territories, or face consequences. Scott's response was immediate and absolute. He prepared for war with the same cold efficiency Lauren had witnessed before, but this time she saw the cost. Watched him mobilize his network, secure his assets, position his soldiers. Watched him transform into something harder than the man who'd learned to build visual schedules for his daughter. That night, Lauren stood in Sandy's doorway and watched Scott kiss his daughter goodnight. His hands were shaking. The dangerous man who'd faced down rivals and ordered terrible things had hands that trembled as he brushed Sandy's hair back and whispered, "Sweet dreams, baby girl." Lauren followed him to his office, closing the door behind her. "Is this the life you want for her?" Her voice was quiet but fierce. "Always looking over your shoulder? Always wondering if today's the day someone uses her to get to you?" Scott's facade cracked like glass. "It's the only life I know, Lauren. The only way I know to provide for her. To keep her safe." Safe. Lauren stepped closer, her heart pounding. "You're giving her everything except what she needs most. A father who's present, not paranoid. Who's alive, not avenging. What good is all this protection if you're too dead or too distant to actually be her father?" "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly. You're so busy building fortresses you've forgotten that what she needs is you. Not your money. Not your power. Just you." Scott stared at her, something breaking in his expression, but before he could respond, his phone erupted with calls. The therapy center. Tuesday afternoon. Sandy's occupational therapy session. Lauren was reviewing sensory integration exercises with the therapist when the door burst open. 2 men she'd never seen before, moving with violent purpose. The therapist screamed. Sandy's hands flew to her ears, her eyes going wide with terror. Lauren's instincts took over. She hit the red emergency button mounted beneath the reception desk, the one Scott's security team had installed in every location Sandy frequented. Then she scooped Sandy into her arms and ran. "Close your eyes, sweetheart. Hold on tight. We're going somewhere quiet. The fire exit." Lauren had memorized every escape route in every building they visited. She burst through the door, setting off alarms, Sandy clinging to her neck. Down the exterior stairs, through the parking lot, into the coffee shop across the street where she'd befriended the barista weeks ago. Back room.
Now.
"Lock the door behind us." The barista didn't ask questions. 30 seconds later, Lauren and Sandy were in the storage room. The door locked, Sandy wrapped in Lauren's arms as she rocked and hummed, blocking out the chaos, creating calm in the middle of crisis. "You're safe. I've got you. You're safe." Scott's security arrived at the therapy center within 4 minutes. They found the 2 Moretti soldiers and eliminated the threat with practiced efficiency. But they didn't find Sandy. Scott's voice over the phone was barely controlled panic when Lauren finally answered.
"Where is she?"
"Where's my daughter?" "She's with me. We're safe. Coffee shop across the street, storage room and back." She'd never heard Scott Walker cry before. He found them 10 minutes later, bursting through the door with wild eyes and drawn weapon. Then he saw them, Sandy curled against Lauren's chest, both of them whole and unharmed, and his knees nearly buckled. "Daddy." Sandy reached for him, and he pulled both of them into his arms, shaking with relief. "Lauren protected me," Sandy said, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "The bad men came, and Lauren took me somewhere safe. Lauren kept me safe." Scott met Lauren's eyes over his daughter's head. The gratitude there was bottomless. So was something else, something that looked like love and fear and desperate hope all tangled together. "You saved her," he whispered. "We saved her," Lauren corrected softly. "Together." The Moretti threat was eliminated with finality. Lauren never asked for details, and Scott never offered them. Some parts of his world would always remain separate, dark corners she didn't need to see. But the aftermath was impossible to miss. Scott began restructuring his organization with the same strategic precision he applied to everything. He couldn't leave the criminal world entirely, too much history, too many ties, but he transformed his role in it. More delegation. Less direct involvement. Fewer late nights surrounded by ledgers and security feeds. More mornings building visual schedules with his daughter. Scott dove into Sandy's world with the intensity of a man who'd finally understood what mattered. He learned to operate her communication device, attended therapy sessions not as an intimidating presence, but as an active participant. He celebrated when Sandy tried a new food, when she used words instead of melting down, when she told him, "I love you, Daddy," without prompting. 6 months passed like watching a photograph develop, slowly revealing something beautiful that had been there all along. Scott became Sandy's fiercest advocate, the father who understood that loving her meant learning her language, not demanding she speak his. And Lauren fell completely, irrevocably in love with the man who listened when he didn't understand, who admitted confusion without shame, who tried every single day to be better for his daughter. On an evening in early summer, they sat in the garden while Sandy chased fireflies. Scott turned to Lauren, his blue eyes soft in the twilight. "I fell in love with you the moment you dimmed those restaurant lights," he said quietly. "The moment you saw my daughter suffering and broke every rule to help her. I've been falling ever since." Lauren's breath caught. "Scott, I know. You work for me. It's complicated." He reached for her hand carefully, giving her space to pull away. "But I need you to know how I feel. I need permission to feel this. And the chance, when you're ready, to see if you feel it too." "Sandy needs stability," Lauren said, though her fingers tightened around his. "Not complications. Sandy needs us both. Happy. Whole. Together." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "We'll go as slow as you need. We'll keep her needs as our compass. But please, Lauren, let me try." They dated like teenagers, careful, cautious, with Sandy's routines as their foundation. Stolen kisses after bedtime. Quiet dinners when she was at therapy. Slow, deliberate steps towards something neither had expected to find. 1 year later, Scott proposed at the dinner table with Sandy present. "We're already a family," he said, holding Lauren's hand while his daughter watched with bright, curious eyes. "I'd like to make it official. If you'll have us." "Does that mean Lauren stays forever?" Sandy asked. "If she says yes," Scott said softly, never looking away from Lauren's face. Lauren's answer came through tears. "Yes." The ceremony was small and perfect. Sandy served as flower girl, wearing decorated noise-canceling headphones that matched her dress. Scott's vows acknowledged the waitress who'd saved his daughter and taught him to be the father she deserved. Lauren's vows honored the man who'd offered her purpose and family when she'd lost everything. That night, Lauren tucked Sandy into bed in the home they all shared now. "You're my real mom," Sandy said sleepily, clutching her teddy bear. "Not because you gave birth to me, because you understand me." Lauren's heart cracked open. "And you're my real daughter, the one who taught me what love really means." Sandy smiled, already drifting off. "Good, because I love you." "I love you too, sweetheart. Always." In the doorway, Scott watched his wife and daughter, the family he'd been given not by blood but by choice, and finally understood what Anna had tried to tell him years ago. Love wasn't about control or protection. It was about presence, understanding, showing up every day and trying. He'd built a fortress to keep them safe. But Lauren had taught him something more important: how to build a home.